कुरान शरीफ किथे गया? मिनकी बताए।
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Before starting, I want to request you all to pray for our sister, Mary Ghafoor Khan from Suriname. She's in Holland at the moment, undergoing an operation. and he especially asked us all to pray for her. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ar-Rahman 'allama al-Qur'ana خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان. This is chapter 55 of the Holy Quran, called Surah Rahman, the Beneficent. And the English translation is, the Beneficent taught the Quran. He created man and taught him expression. The sun and the moon follow a reckoning, and the herbs and the trees adore him. And the heaven, he raised it high, and he set up the measure, that you may not exceed the measure, and keep up the balance with equity, nor fall short in that measure. Over the last 2 years, and more recently in the UK, we have had extreme heat this week, which has led to many places catching fire. And many houses have been destroyed, and as far as I know, I don't think there's been any loss of life. But this has been a common theme in the United States, in Australia, in the whole of Europe over the last 2 years. And here, Allah talks about His creation. And when He talks about His own being, He says, Ar-Rahman, that I am that merciful being. And the first sign of His mercy is Allama al-Quran, that I gave man the Holy Quran. Literal translation is taught the Quran. And then He says, created human beings and taught them how to speak and how to read and write. Taught man expression. But the interesting thing that I want to talk about, I mean, all of it is interesting, but what I want to talk about is, God says that, you see, the first thing you say is that environment in Islam includes everything. Because here God talks about the sun, the moon, the stars, the herbs, the trees, heavens, later on mountains and grain and fruits, and things that we can see and things that we cannot see. So Islam includes everything, all the components of the environment that we live in. And God says, in the heavens he raised high and he set up a measure, a balance. And we can see this measure, this balance all around us. Recently, telescopes have been sent into space and they've been able to see to the end, literally to the end of the universe. And they've seen that the whole of the universe is created and held together in a balance of forces. A slight change in any of these would cause an absolute calamity. For example, if the gravitational force of Earth changed slightly and it pulled the moon in, the moon will crash into the Earth and it will probably destroy everything on Earth before the moon hit the Earth. But then there'll be more drastic consequences because there's a balance of forces between the sun and the Earth and the moon and Venus and Jupiter and everything else. When moon leaves its place, that balance throughout the solar system will be disturbed. And because the balance throughout the solar system will be disturbed, that means that the balance throughout the whole of the universe will be disturbed. Other solar systems will be affected by this. And this is what God says. Ash-shamsu wal-qamaru bi-husban. And the sun and the moon, they follow a reckoning. They follow a path that has been determined by these forces. And you cannot disturb them. And this is obvious. But then God refers to the other place, specifically Earth. And I didn't recite this, but the verse 10 says, Wal arda wada'a halil anam. And he made Earth the place where living creatures could exist. But before that, before God did that, he says that he raised heavens high and set up the measure. This is what I was talking about. The balance of forces that keeps everything together. But a part of all this was the fact that, I might have mentioned this before, that Earth is enveloped in an atmosphere. Because the rays that come from the sun can be extremely harmful and damaging. Well, you know, we have radioactive elements on Earth. And when you go into somewhere, a hospital, and they're going to take x-rays, they're warning signs. Don't go in there. X-rays are being taken. Why? That radiation can damage your body. So we can see that human beings, and in fact, if you have been x-rayed recently, you would find that the person being x-rayed goes into a different room. The door is closed. The technician taking the x-ray stands behind a protective shield to x-ray whatever part of body it is, your chest or whatever. So we take these protective measures, but God also created a balance. One reason for creating the atmosphere and the gases and the arrangement of gases was to stop this harmful radiation from reaching the ground. This is why this is the sequence in which it's described. That God raised the heavens, set up a measure. So he created this system to protect us. And on top, we have what's called ozone. And that is an extremely important protective layer right on top of our atmosphere. And now we know that our misuse of what God has created, because God says here, keep up the balance with equity, nor fall short in the measure. And we have fallen short. We have created a hole in the ozone layer. Fortunately, it's over North Pole. But if it keeps expanding, that protective layer would be removed, and we would all be subjected to the harmful radiation of the sun, and we'll get all manner of cancers. As it is, when a lot of people go out into sunshine because they are not used to it, they have to use sunblock and all this kind of thing to protect their skin. Otherwise, the skin burns. And they get boils and all manner of things. And can you imagine what it will be like if that ozone layer is removed? And it is sad that although protecting the environment is a duty of every Muslim, Muslims unfortunately completely ignore and disregard it. I shouldn't say Muslims actually, people in the third world, which is going to be most affected. Why are they going to be most affected? Because their governments have the least means of enacting the measures required to protect their people. Rich governments will do something, but do you think they're going to provide means to Ghana and Nigeria and Bangladesh and all these people to protect their citizens? No, they won't. We know if global warming continues at this rate and the snow and ice, the North Pole and South Pole continue to melt and add clean, fresh water to the salty waters of the sea, apart from anything else, sea levels will rise. And we know that Mauritius will disappear. 2/3 of Bangladesh will disappear. Millions of people are going to be drowned or die of starvation and so on. But does anyone mention that? Did anyone mention it? Did anyone care about it? Until the forests of Europe and America and Australia were set on fire. We have people like Mr. Trump, who they say is going to be elected the president of America once again at the next election, who don't believe in global warming. It's like saying, I don't believe in mountains, or I don't believe in forests. How can you not believe in something that science tells you is happening? People say we don't believe in God because there's no scientific proof, but there is scientific proof of global warming. In UK, for example, the top temperatures until this week, 5 years when there were top temperatures, record-breaking temperatures, I think 8 years. 7 of those have been since 2003. And we're talking about over 100 years. Why? Doesn't that prove that the temperature is going up? And this is all happens because Islam says, God tells us here, He set up a measure, He set up a system. And God says, do not exceed that measure. And we have exceeded it. Global warming means that we are going to run out of water to drink. And there are thousands of other things. We have been pouring insecticides and fertilizers onto our crops. Those that don't get used up, it rains and they get washed into the ground. That groundwater then gets into the rivers and then into the seas. Basically, the rivers become poison. That's poisonous water. Fish and marine life die. When that water gets to the sea, fish and marine life there will die. Your food source, an important food source, will disappear. And it took nearly 40 years to clean the Thames of the effluents that was discharged into it. Can you imagine how long it's going to take to clean up all the rivers in the world and all the seas in the world? And the frightening thing is, the places which got cleaned up because the politicians had the will to do it. London's atmosphere in 1950s, about 70 years ago, the government used to put out warnings in the winter. If you've got asthma, if you're old, don't go out or you will die. There is so much smoke, there's so much pollution in the air that you won't be able to breathe. Stay home. We know of the young person who had asthma, and they lived by North Circular in London. And that kid was going to school, had an asthma attack, and died. Why? Because the level of pollution generated by cars. And this goes on and on and on. Our environmental resources, they include water, they include plants, they include animals, they include birds, they include land, they include air, they include sea, and God knows what else. There is a problem in many countries these days. Guess why? Because that little creature called the honeybee is dying out. Why is it dying out? It's dying out because of the poisonous fertilizers and insecticide which is sprayed on the crops. It goes and sits on there to absorb the nectar, and basically it absorbs that poison as well and dies. If that little honeybee, its death, is now recognized that it will create havoc across the planet Earth. pollination will disappear. Honeybees, etc., are a great aid to pollination. How are you going to pollinate plants? Is the government going to pass a law saying every Saturday or Sunday, every able-bodied person must go out and by hand take flowers and rub them on each other? They used to do that in Arabia at the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. Are we going to go back to that time? But it all comes about because Muslims do not take the time to understand the Quran. I was going to say read the Quran, but they read it plenty, but it's like a parrot. You just rush through from one end to the other. And generally, we recite the Holy Quran when someone is dead to transfer the blessings of the recitation to the soul of the departed. But the point of the Holy Prophet saying, the point of reading the whole of the Holy Quran, Ramadan, is to constantly remind ourselves of what its message is. So it may be better if you read one chapter of the Holy Quran, fully going through all its verses and understanding the message that there is in it for us. I've just recited 9 verses of the Holy Quran. And if people were to read that with understanding, they will stop polluting the ground, the air, and everything else around us. Allah forbids in the Holy Quran the destruction of our environment. And God says, do good as Allah has been good to you. He has been good to you and good to us in giving us all these things. In Al-Qasas, verse 77, it says, do not seek to cause corruption in the earth. And people always talk about, new religions coming up and you get up on your horse and, you go and attack and kill other people, etc. No, it also applies to environmental protection. Do not cause corruption in the earth. Allah does not love the corruptors. And the corruptors will be sent to hell. What do you think it was as people were desperately trying to flee their campsites, their holiday sites, as the jungles and the forests around them were set on fire, and they were terrified of being burnt alive? What was it for the people who had to flee their homes to save their lives in England earlier in the week? In Al-Araf, verse 31, God says, eat and drink, but be not wasteful by excessive use. And that is what we have done. We've destroyed the earth for our children and our grandchildren. Soon we will be dead. But we've made sure that they don't live for very long either by what we have done to the ground and to the air. So please, my request to you is whenever you do anything, consider its environmental impact. Even little things. Save water. The Holy Prophet said, don't waste water even if you're by the side of a river. The Holy Prophet forbade cutting down of trees and 1,000 other things. We talk about Sunnah and Hadith and following the orders of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, but as we mercilessly cut down trees and so on, it doesn't occur to us that those are also orders of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعنا وإياكم بالآيات وذكر الحكيم إنه تعالى جواد كريم ملك بر رحيم. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم واجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم. عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya alal falah, qad qamatis salah, qad qamatis salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdinas siratal mustaqim Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانهر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. Allahu Akbar. Sami'allahu liman hamida. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahmanir Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in Ihdinas siratal mustaqim Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghairil maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amin. Qul a'udzu birabbin nas malikin nas ilahin nas min syarril waswasil khannas allazi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas minal jinnati wan nas. Allahu Akbar. Sami'allahu liman hamidah.
ربنا
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullah. Astagfirullah. Astagfirullah. Warahmatullahi. Thank you very much for joining us. I just want to remind you that until we hear from our sister in Holland about how her operation went and so on, please continue to pray for her full and speedy recovery. And of course, as I always say, please pray to Allah to keep the whole of humanity safe and sound and free from harm. Assalamu alaikum. Khuda hafiz. Goodbye. लोग ही क्लिक कर